Well, he's one of our favorite college football journalists of all time, Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports, who has been all over the Big Ten expansion and the future of college football. Dennis, the humblest of welcomes, and I want to jump right in with some honesty. My fandom has increased lately. Mike can confirm. I wrote a manifesto back in July predicting that the Big Ten will eventually include 6 former Pac-12 teams when it's all said and done. And your reporting indicates that remains a very strong possibility. So thank you for backing up my guess.
Yeah, no, I really think it's up right now. The whole thing is in the laps of the Big Ten presidents. If they want to do this, if Kevin Warren, the commissioner, can convince them to do this, then it's going to happen. They really hold the levers. Now, I'm not sure it is, but Kevin Warren continues to push this as his initiative to really, I don't know what the word is. He calls himself a disruptor and a change agent and all this other stuff to really take over college sports. If you think about it, at least 20 teams, academically and athletically, maybe the best ever conference. The implications for the tournament, for the expanded college football playoff alone, forget the money, are massive. So, and I think that's part of the reason why he's doing it. I mean, we can talk about not the abuses, but the presence of money in the system. It just is, guys. It just is right now.
One of the things I think is interesting is when the presidents are looking at this, obviously you've got the revenue from the potential TV deal, but what about the research side when you look at the money that a Stanford generates? Is there any chance that the presidents would say, okay, maybe the TV doesn't add up perfectly, but the dollars on the research side, which is even bigger than the TV dollars, is that something that they're considering, or is that something that us sports people should just stick to sports?
No, you raise a great point. I think the fact that Stanford and Cal would be in the mix helps it sell to the presidents, in that every school in the Big Ten now, except Nebraska, is an AAU school, which is the American Association of Universities. If people don't know it, it's a century-old organization of elite research universities. And you basically have to have a teaching hospital, blah, 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 attached to your school. And if you can Google the list, it is very elite. Stanford and Cal are on there. I think Oregon and Washington are on there as well.
Yes.
So it would be everybody but Nebraska, who, by the way, lost their accreditation. Still the only school in the century-old history of this group to lose its accreditation a month after joining the Big Ten. So yeah, that would be a big piece.
Probably Scott Frost. It's his fault.
No. The irony is Jim Delaney got up there in Lincoln and said, talked about the great academic match of the Big Ten, and then a month later they're Kansas State.
Oops. Yeah, those in fact are the 4 teams that I think in the year 2030 we look back, and I think those 4 teams, Stanford, Cal, Oregon, Washington, join USC and UCLA as kind of a Western, division, if you will, of the expanded Big Ten. How important is it? Is it any concern at all that you do need to have other Western partners? Obviously, you need to have the money there. You mentioned again the AAU, affiliation with the research side of this, and that's big for the Big Ten presidents. But at the same time, in terms of the dollars making it happen, you mentioned that Amazon is still very much in talks with the Big Ten, that they actually put out a pretty good package the Big Ten turned away from. Yeah. Can they make that work? And it sounds like about a week ago you had a column saying, hey, these other 4 schools are very much in play if Kevin Warren can get the Amazon thing to work out.
Yeah, I think if he can get a number from Amazon that is palatable, that satisfies the presidents, then he can do it. But that's a big if. I was told, industry sources told me that number is somewhere south of 100 million for those 4 schools. So you're talking about less than $25 million a year for those 4 schools, when the other 16 are making 75, maybe 80 million per year. So the question then becomes, well, 2 questions. Does one of those tech giant streamers, Apple, Amazon, some other entity, want to get in on the ground floor for content that is not going to be great? Apple teamed up with MLS for 10 years because they get the whole league, and soccer's huge, so they get the whole league. The Fox deal with CBS and NBC is the top, the top content. Whoever buys, if they buy it, whoever buys those 4 schools will get 5th, 6th, and 7th choices every Saturday, and none of them will be Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State. So you have to think about that. But the long-term play may be we're in the ground floor. This is an investment. The next time this comes open, and it's only a 7-year deal, that's a blink of an eye in media rights, that, we could be a partner and get in as an equity partner. So, and don't forget that according to a report from Sports Business Journal, Amazon outbid the other suitors for one of the packages and did not make it because of, number one, visibility. The presidents or whoever were worried about their team's ability to be seen by people, and distribution. People don't know this. The 100% of the U.S. isn't wired for hard cable yet to even get this. I don't know what the number is, but I was told like Morgantown, West Virginia isn't wired for this. So
Wow.
that's another thing to think about.
Huh.
Yeah, that is interesting. Two questions on a follow-up. Is there an escalator clause in the existing Fox, CBS, NBC deals that if 4 more teams were to come in, do the networks maybe pay a little bit more? That's the first question. And then the second question is, even though you would have a lesser degree of games, with the 5th, 6th, and 7th, do you think the novelty factor, at least for the first 7 years, would be enough to offset that? Because, the bottom line is maybe Washington and, Indiana is not a huge sell, but it is something that fans really haven't seen much of.
Yeah, that's a good question, because you're balancing the fact that the likes of Indiana, Purdue, Minnesota, what have you, are against this because of what I just mentioned. We don't want our games on streaming because streaming hasn't hit yet. I just mentioned how 100% of the houses aren't wired yet. The Big 12, on the other hand, had in their last deal went with ESPN Plus for a lot of their content because there was not enough eyeballs to launch a network. So that was the best play for them. And I think your other question was about what was your first question?
Would there be escalator clause?
Yeah, to my knowledge, this would be a separate deal. Fox and ESPN are against expansion. They're all but screaming it to the Big Ten because they think this kind of devalues the product if there's a separate contract set out there for those 4 teams. But again, that doesn't preclude the Big Ten or Kevin Warren from doing it. In 2016, the Big 12 was looking at expanding basically the 4 teams that they brought in last year, Cincinnati, BYU, UCF, and Houston. And they ultimately didn't do it because they didn't want to antagonize ESPN, because there was an escalator clause in that contract, which amazingly enough basically said, if the Big 12 brought in any 4 teams that they wanted, they would get $1 billion more money over the course of the contract. In other words, $250 million per team. And look where that got them. ESPN went and helped get Texas and Oklahoma last year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's look outside of Pac-12 teams going to the Big Ten. There have been a number of other schools that we heard rumblings of, Notre Dame, North Carolina, even heard Miami. Florida State doesn't really fit the model in terms of the research with AAU. But what other schools are you still hearing of some possible conversations regarding the Big Ten?
Well, there's really no others in play. You got to look across the country. Unless Notre Dame wakes up tomorrow and decides to join, that's it. That ain't happening. I don't think there's any desire to get any ACC to conference, and they can't find any holes in it. It's ironclad through the next 14 years. You basically can't leave without the conference owning your TV rights. So if that's the case, then I don't think there's anywhere else. I don't think there's anywhere else the Big Ten wants to go. I don't think there's anywhere else where they have to conquer the world. I think if they get these 4, then the Big 12 gets the 4 corner schools: Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah. And then the story becomes, that's the end of the Pac-12. What does that look like? Again, Fox and ESPN are really against this. They would rather have a Pac-12. Number one, it's stability in the market, and both those networks, all of them, like cost certainty. Number two, I think ESPN wants a crack at, really wants that fourth window, which the Pac-12, if nothing else, with those 10 teams right now owns. And by the fourth window, I mean late night. We can all make fun of Pac-12 after dark, but what people didn't realize was that did a number ratings wise that was better than the alternative, which was infomercials at that point or whatever. I mean,
Right.
you take your point. I mean, Saturday Night Live's on, but it was worth programming whatever the Pac-12 had at that point to show. So I think that's why they want to keep it together, and that's why this is really teetering on the brink of the Pac-12 going away.
Yeah, and I keep thinking that if you look at the attractiveness of having, again, and it's a bad way to describe it, but a Big Ten Pac-12 battles, at 10 o'clock at night, I see a lot of us Midwesterners staying up watching another game because it's like, holy cow, we can get an opportunity to get some more football. And one thing I think is also underrated in what Kevin Warren has done is the way he's partnered with the networks that are broadcasting on Sundays all day long, the NFL, which is the powerhouse in television. It reminds me a little bit of what Vince McMahon pulled off by going to Fox and elevating, the whole exposure of that as well. I think that may be an underestimated part of what Warren has done to get that type of spotlight on Sunday afternoon for your advertising for next week's game.
Well, and he has, and that's a great point. I should mention on the advertising piece, if Amazon does this, then a big part of this is they can promote their Saturday games on Thursday Night Football and vice versa. That's a big part of it. It's called the halo effect. When you have, when networks had the national championship, they spend the whole season saying, don't forget to watch the national championship on ABC or ESPN. The other part of that is you mentioned the NFL, and both Greg Sankey and Kevin Warren have sort of said it out loud now that the way it's structured, the SEC and Big Ten are like the NFL, AFC and NFC, if you will. And if you look what Kevin Warren did with this contract, they own these windows now. They have a big noon window. They have a 3:30 window on NBC, or I'm sorry, on CBS, which, is great for us, great for me, great for our company. Wow, Big Ten. Great to have them back. And then the primetime window on NBC, which has been branded the Big Ten on Saturday night. This is a big deal. So what do we see on Sundays? We see our Central Time,
right?
Noon, 3 o'clock, and prime time on Sunday. It's very, very much like the NFL now.
I think you're exactly right, that you're setting up the same kind of thing. And as we mentioned, Kevin Warren, his NFL background, said he would like to see that kind of model. And I think as well, you made another great point in terms of the cross marketing and the advertising. You can follow the direct chain of what networks had what NFL package in the 90s and how their weekly ratings went. When NBC lost, when CBS lost the NFC to Fox, their programming during the week, the numbers went down. When they then took the AFC away from NBC, their numbers went back up and NBC's went down. I mean, so that's what I think people don't understand, is that you are buying a window every Sunday afternoon to promote during the week. So
that's great.
And there's nothing else that was going to deliver that captive audience, because, look at the sports bars that have made billions of dollars over the years, because what do? We go eat after church and we go watch our favorite team or whatever.
That's a great observation, because what I realized in August when they announced that new deal is that, and they hammered it home, nothing beats live sports content on broadcast TV, on over-the-air TV. Linear cable is still right there, but there is still something that reaches the masses better about over-the-air. And by over-the-air broadcast, I'm talking about the major networks: Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS. ESPN's losing subscribers, but they're making it up, other ways, and they're still a giant. But that is still the mother's milk of the industry. And if you can own that, you own a lot. And to your point, that even during the week, that it means ratings. The translation of it brands you as a big time entity. Not that they weren't before, but if you've got, hey, we're the network of the NFL, we're the network of the Big Ten, that means a lot.
Yeah, I almost think for a lot of people, my age at 55, a seminal moment in TV watching was when Fox got the NFC. It was all of a sudden their nighttime,
Yeah.
became a real thing because they were kind of like, oh yeah, well, this happened. The other question I have to ask you is, so I'm trying to sell to my wife how I have to work all day on Saturday because I have to watch the Big Ten, for 12 hours. Any tips on that? Because I get some sideways glances when I'm on the couch and let's say I've got, a piece of pizza and I'm like, honey, I'm trying to focus.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a strain. Listen, I'm not going to say it's easy. I
Thank you.
do it now with, when I'm not out, with the country where, okay, how many screens can I get up? I really like stat broadcast. I don't know if you guys see that. It's not the play-by-play, it's the box score on your screen of every game, and it breaks it down. So you know what people are doing in real time, which is something even the TVs can't give you because they're doing mostly images, and not stats. So yeah. And then you look up and go, oh, it's midnight and it's the third quarter at USC, and you go, oh, sorry, honey.
Yeah. I'm working.
I don't have any tips there.
Right. my wife she just slowly just goes to bed, and she knows 2:30 in the morning. Here I come. Yeah. So
yeah, we'll see you in January.
Exactly. That's right. Hey, Dennis,
well, then but then it's college basketball. Right. Like, I got more work. There's just more work than I can do. I'm just one person.
And that's worse for me, as you know. I just don't sleep in March. I've given up a long time ago. Hey, Dennis, we don't want to take too much of your time, but it is great talking with you, and we hopefully you can find some time in your schedule to come back and join us later on toward the end of the season, and let's talk some more.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
All right, Dennis Dodd. Be sure to give him a follow on Twitter, Dennis Dodd, CBSSports.com. And I will tell you, I'm not just pandering to our guest. It's the first place I go every day, several times a day. And if it's a Dennis Dodd article, it's the first one that I read. So, and I've been doing that for about 15 years now. Dennis, thanks again. Stay with us. We're back with much more after this. Keep it here.